Today is Monday, July 20th, and we are here for Liz Sterling's interview series with people making a difference. And she will be today interviewing Sandra Lilienthal.
Okay, fabulous. We're ready to go. Thank you so much, Marcia and Kim and everybody from IJKL and my Wisdom Circle friends and everybody who's found themselves here. We're zooming in. We're with an educator, and we're with a woman who is very well known for establishing curriculum, someone who has spent years and years involved with international faculty of the Melton School of the Adult Jewish Learning, and also partaking in the curriculum for IJKL, I believe it's the Pillars of Judaism series. So Sandra Lilienthal received her master's degree in Jewish Studies and her doctorate in Jewish education from Grants College. And she, in 2015, was the winner of the Covenant Award for Excellence in Jewish Education. And I am so grateful that I'm here, Liz Sterling, with you all today, zooming in for our interview series with people making a difference. Sandra, welcome to our interview conversation.
Liz, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here, and it's such an honor to be here. I know many of the people that are here and love them and have been teaching them for several years. As I always say, I don't always teach, I learn from them as well, and we have a very, very, very sweet relationship, and I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk with you.
So that's fabulous. You know, one of the things that I asked you was for one of the, what we call takeaways. What's a takeaway from today that you want people to have? And one of the things you said is learning is a lifelong activity. And I think we're committed to that because we love learning. What is it in Judaism? I feel like there's something in my DNA that makes me, and I'm going to extrapolate and say us, to love learning. What is this all about?
I believe it is ingrained in the very beginnings of Judaism. When you look historically speaking, many religions had the power in the hands of the clergy. Not that Judaism didn't have that, we had that too. But the difference was that Judaism gave the power to the clergy to make laws, to make decisions, but not to be the ones who held knowledge. So it has always been taught in Judaism that every Jewish child, and that included girls in a time when girls were not learning, had to know how to read, had to know how to write, and had to be able to study sacred texts. So this is something that was ingrained in us from the very beginning. One of the things that a father had an obligation to do was to teach his children. It is in the Shema, which we repeat every day, twice a day, that you will teach your children. So that's who we are. And what I believe happened is as the world progressed and we left the exclusive Jewish world, this thirst for knowledge really expanded to the secular world as well, to what at one point Yeshiva University called Torah Umada, which is Torah and scientific knowledge. And it does not surprise me that Jews have always had a very high percentage of the Jewish population in colleges and in any kind of learning program, because as you said, it is really ingrained, if not in our DNA, at least in what we have been teaching for over 3,000 years.
You wrote to me and you said, to teach is to learn is to teach. Tell me a little bit more about that.
There are two aspects to that. Number one, every class that I teach, I prepare for 2 or 3 hours before that, even if it is something that I've taught many times. And there are a couple of reasons why I do that. Number one is because even if I'm familiar with a topic, the way I read the topic today is certainly different from how I read it 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, not to mention even before that, right? Wherever we are in life, when you interact with a teaching, especially with profound teachings as the ones that Judaism has to offer, you really read it differently. I tend to compare it to The Little Prince. And I actually took a beautiful class, Jewish class, on the Talmudic reading of The Little Prince. And I said, wow, this is what I've been saying for years, right? If you read The Little Prince when you're 8 years old, it's one book. And if you read it as a teenager, it is a completely different book. And you read it as an adult, and it is a completely different book, even though the words are exactly the same. So I believe that I have to reread things because I might find insights or things that I hadn't really seen in the text before. So that's why teaching, in order to teach, I have to learn. But there's also another aspect to that. And it is that a lot of what we learn, especially if you do Jewish learning the way it is supposed to be, Jewish learning is never supposed to be somebody opening a book at home by him or herself. It is always supposed to be done at least in 2, if not in more. And the reason for that is exactly so that you have other opinions and other thoughts coming into that conversation. If I'm only interacting with the text, I can only see in the text that which I see. But if Liz, you and I are learning a text and you see something that I haven't seen and you bring that up, now I am also learning, even though I was teaching. So there are these 2 aspects. I have to learn, prepare before I teach. And also during a class, I am learning from the interaction of the students with me and among themselves.
So we get to learn from each other, but let me extrapolate what you just said, if we can, because you participated in the Eli Talks. That's like the TED Talks for Jewish people. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was titled something about choosing the miracles in our lives. And you told 2 stories about 2 different rabbis, Eleazar and Akiva, and how they each had different ways of seeing the world. And one of the rabbis could see miracles from a different point of view. Would you fill us in on this that I'm referring to? Because I think it's with learning and teaching and with how we see the world and what we're gaining from it that enriches our lives.
Sure. So there was this one rabbi that had, the first story that you're referring to is a story where there are a group of rabbis that are discussing Jewish law. And one of the rabbis is always right, but the other rabbis that are discussing with him never agree with what he's saying. And they constantly complain. And so he complains to God and says, God, if I'm right, let a tree move or let the waters flow opposite. And all those miracles happen. And yet God says to him, yeah, but it's not about me. It's about you guys. So basically meaning, and I'm making the story very short, but basically meaning that once God gave us all of this Jewish teaching, it is now in our hands. And when we learn and we teach, we are infusing it with our own realities and our own understandings. So it's not just what God meant, especially because none of us really knows what God meant. It is what we take out of these sacred texts. And I always tell people, for me, they're holy, not because who wrote them, because I don't know who wrote them. They're holy because they have life lessons that are still valid over 3,500 years later. That's what makes it holy to me. And so I
want to go further and carry it into my everyday life. When I walk outside, when I wake up in the morning and I experience life, how is it cumulative, my experiences, my knowledge and wisdom that I've garnered? Or is there something in the moment that is sacred that's waiting for me to meet it so that I can learn from it and have an interactive experience that's a nourishment to my soul?
And it's not an either or, Liz. You can have, it's both ways, right? Every moment is a moment. And every moment, and that's what Rabbi Akiva basically said, and the Baal Shem Tov says it in a much more like a very strong way, which is there are so many miracles happening around us at all times. And then he says, and yet man chooses to cover his eyes with his little hand and sees nothing. And I believe that we really have to actively open our eyes. Meaning, if we are expecting huge miracles, we're expecting, thunder and lightning on Mount Sinai and then God coming out of it. If we are expecting waters to part, that's not going to happen. And in my talk, I actually offer a theory as why this no longer happens. But the miracles, the daily miracles that we see, when you go outside and you see that the sun rises every day, and when you see people that are pregnant and you think of how that life is being created, and all of these, you know, the flowers that are blooming and butterflies and everything. I mean, there's so many miracles around us that I believe that if we open our eyes, we have a very, very strong connection to this spirituality that is all around us, which we sometimes choose not to see.
Right now, I think it's vital and mandatory that we view ourselves in relationship to the world, where we can move that covering, the masks from our eyes, so that we can see a brighter world. It's hard right now. I mean, you know, you told me before we began that you're super busy. So I'm wondering, you know, what your take is on where we are and what is vital for us to do to make our lives feel meaningful right now.
So I was just thinking when you said, you know, take the mask, and I'm like, right, take it from your eyes and cover your mouth and nose, right?
But,
right. But I want to point out a couple of things. There are people who have tried and are still trying to understand why this is happening. To be very honest, I find that to be a waste of time. To try to understand why it is happening is a waste of time. You want a scientific answer because there's a virus and it's highly contagious. That's why. You want a religious answer? I don't think we're going to find a religious answer, because unless God is talking to somebody and I don't know about that, we won't have that religious answer. I believe, though, that how we approach what is happening is what is really important. So I don't think that anybody is happy with where we are now. This is not something we wanted. This is not something we look forward to. Every single one of us can make a long list of things that we have lost in this time frame, whether it is a loss of jobs or a loss of contact with other human beings, or trips that we were going to make and are not going to happen. And we can go on and on and on. We have a choice to focus on the negatives. There are a lot of negatives. We also have a choice to look at what's happening and say, okay, what can I learn from this? Not why did it happen, but what can I learn from this that can make me a better, more prepared person, not just now, but in what's yet to come. So one of the things that I was mentioning to you is that had I in January said to my students, guys, you know what? We're all going to go online. We're going to do this technology stuff. It's called Zoom. I would have had a whole uproar. Right? We can't do this. We're too old for this. This is new technology. I don't know how to even turn my computer on. I don't know what Zoom is. I don't know this. I don't know that. And yet we have an entire generation that thought, and I'm going to underline thought, they were unable to figure out technology, and they have figured it out. Every single one of those people should be tapping themselves on the back and saying, wow, this is amazing. Now, what is going to happen after, God willing, we're all going back to normal life? Many of us will still have children living in other places, not next door to us. Right. We have just found a way of including those people in our Seder, which until now, we would have said, what can I do? My family lives in California. You know, we can't do Seder together. Well, we would never have figured out that we could do a Seder together if it weren't for the fact that we couldn't be together with anybody else. And this goes for Shabbat services. People who could not attend Shabbat services because they don't have transportation Friday night, or because they are not feeling well, or because they're having mobility issues. And suddenly, they now know how to join a Shabbat service almost anywhere in the world. So I'm not saying that what we're going through is good. I don't believe it's good. I don't believe any of us would have chosen this. But there's so much good that we can take out of the bad. And that's what I believe Judaism teaches us to do, to look for those good bits.
You know, in the beginning, early in April, I remember a lot of the conversations and the blogs and the podcasts were a lot about, you know, looking at the silver linings, like what can we extract from this? And I think that's what you're saying. We already can see visibly. I'm having Zoom conversations with my daughter. She moved into a new house. I was able to walk through the house with her. You know, we knew FaceTime was around and Skype, but this has made it very user-friendly. And we're all of us who are on here, almost 60 of us today, are testament to the fact that we're still able to connect. And I'd like to talk about connection because not everybody is feeling like I have a friend and her brother died from COVID on Friday. And all I wanted to do was be there to hug her. And I couldn't. And I didn't know how to quite reconcile that. My words and my heartfelt connection, they just didn't feel like quite enough. And yet I had to tell myself that if she could feel me and I could feel her, that would be enough, you know, it would be sufficient. So this little connection, because we talk about being connected spiritually to each other, that's like the spirituality of our lives is connection. So I'd like your take on it, since you are so active and such an influence in curriculum, in creating as an educator, in helping people to connect. Take us this one step over this bridge, if you will.
So I think one of the worst losses that we have had to endure is exactly this lack of being able to hug somebody. For me, the hardest part, and unfortunately I have seen several, a Zoom funeral is not natural. A Zoom Shiva is not natural. Shiva is a system that was put in place so that you could have the human connection, people visiting you and hugging you, and that Zoom can't do. Now, with that said, I believe that we are talking to each other much more than we did before, right? I have people in this call that I am seeing almost every day, whereas I wouldn't see them almost every day. It is not the ideal scene, but it's a question of reframing what we understood to be a personal connection. And I am not saying that this is better. I don't think this is better. I can't wait to go back to teaching in person and being able to hug my students, right? But I do see.
And you see that, Sandra, you do see that, like you hold that as part of your vision?
100%.
Okay, good. Because some people are like, I don't know, are we ever going to get back? Are we going to ever be in a room together again? Are we going to ever be able to hug hello? And not everyone has been able to have a trajectory that sees that. You do, firmly and clearly.
I firmly do. I will say that nowhere in the next semester, I am totally resigned, for the lack of a better word, that until December we will be teaching online. I think it's going to depend on what's going to happen. Is there going to be a second wave or not? Are we going to have a vaccine or not? So this might be 6 months, it might be another year. But I am very, very confident that we will go back to maybe a new normal, right? Maybe we will have to all walk around with hand sanitizers. Maybe we will have to sit 6 feet apart. Maybe we will only be able to hug with masks on. But I do believe that we will go back to being physically present in the same room. Until then, though,
right,
what I would say is a lot of us have more time today to call people than we had before, because we're not going through our crazy lives of, you know, doing a lot of other things. We have time to check on people. We have time to call. We have time to connect. As you were saying, you're connecting to people that live out of state. These are things that are also connection. They're not substitutes, but they're a different kind of connection. And I think we can't just forget that this too is connection. The other kind of connection is basically put on hold. And I'm very sorry for that, because there are people that I really would like to be hugging. But it's going to come back at some point. And until then, I'm enjoying the connections that I'm making through classes online, through phone calls. I have a student of mine that we have coffee once a month together. And so we used to have it in person. It became, let's have coffee online. So she gets her coffee, I get my coffee, and we're on Zoom having our coffee.
Right.
You know, it can be done. So we can still connect. And I think now it is even more important that we connect with each other because we don't have the physical.
How do people connect with you online? Some people who are not familiar with you so that they can learn and they can listen to your Eli talk. And also, I believe you were a recipient for an award and that was recorded on your website. So let's get people to connect with you and then we'll move forward in our conversation.
So my website has basically all the information, my email, my phone, my forms of contact, classes that I teach, everything. It's sandralilienthal.com. So it's very easy to remember and everything is there. The recording of the Eli talk is there. The recording of the award is there. Everything is there.
With regard to curriculums, how long have you been creating curriculums? What does it actually mean? And what changes have you seen over this period of time, right up till today? And then the third part of that question would be, what are you envisioning for the future? So big overview, if you will, of curriculum, teachings, education. What does it look like?
So in my little world of adult Jewish education, I've been writing for about 25 years, and there has been a great change. 25 years ago, people would sign up for a 2-year program without a problem. Because of everything that has happened in the world, not COVID related, but internet related, right? The fact that we have everything in the, like, on the tip of our hands, literally on a phone, and quick and fast and etc. We have become a lot less likely to commit to a long-term learning. So one of the things that I have noticed, and we have done that, is we are offering shorter courses. Now, the shorter courses do not mean less learning, and it doesn't mean that people are not going to sign up for the next one, and they do. They just don't want to be asked to commit for something that is, you know, in the long run. People have other obligations. People have a lot of things happening. The other thing that I will say is that we have had a shift, which I think is extremely positive, from thinking of education as literacy training and thinking of education, which is how we thought about education 25 years ago, and thinking of education today as meaningful and relevant connection. Mm-hmm. Which is very different, right? And that is also in part, the cause of internet. The truth is, there is nothing that I can teach anyone that is not available online. Any text that I can bring to a class is available online. You don't need me. What I and any other instructor or curriculum writer is here to do is to help you find how this text is meaningful to you, not to me, right? So we used to say the sage on the stage, and we move that to the guide on the side. And I always go back to a Brazilian sociologist and educator, very well known, who used to say that being an educator is like being a midwife. You are helping the person bring out that which is already inside of them. And I believe that that's my role as an educator. So when I write curriculum, what I spend a lot of time doing is thinking on how I am going to present that material to you in a way that you can find the relevancy in the text, right? It's not about the text itself.
Right. It's perfect because the meaning comes from the individual. I mean, I think the word educate comes from educe. Maybe the Latin root is to bring forth.
Correct.
To bring forth what's in. So I think of our kids, grandchildren who are being taught and it's being put on them rather than being brought forth from within them. anytime you have an experience that comes through you rather than be putting on you, it's alive. And actually, that's something that you say. You say that Judaism is a living religion. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. But I think as we're talking about this way of being educated and finding meaning in our lives, maybe that's where the living part of it comes from. Is that correct for you?
I think that the Jewish knowledge per se is not meaningful. What is meaningful is how Jewish knowledge helps you live a more meaningful life, right? I mean, I can have knowledge about 150 different laws, and I'm not sure that that makes any difference in my life. However, if I learn the reasoning behind the laws, and then I say, wow, this is an incredible reasoning. How does that speak to me today? So I'm just going to give a very simple example. We talk a lot about the laws of keeping kosher. There are tons of laws about keeping kosher, right? About 20 years ago, there were several rabbis that started saying the whole idea of keeping kosher is that it is an ethical way of eating. Well, if that is the case, what do we today understand as an ethical way of eating? And these people started promoting, for example, you do not eat at a restaurant where the people that work there do not have a decent income, that are not getting health insurance, etc., because that is unethical. Mm-hmm. So I'm not suggesting that people should do A or B, but I'm giving an example on how we take the meaning behind the law and we look at it with your eyes of a 21st century Jew, and you say, okay, so maybe for me the most important thing is not to not mix meat and milk, but look at all of the values that are imbued and then see which of those values are relevant to you and which ones you want to put in practice, and how are you going to do that? So it is a living religion.
And it also requires reflection, time, consideration, awareness, self-awareness. I mean, you know, you're really presenting a whole other approach to our living and learning and having life experience. And that is, it can't be from the outside in, it's going to come from the inside out. Right. Let me look at where I am today in reference to what has been either imposed or given or implanted. Let me look at the two of them together and then see where I meet it. Where is that intersection for me today? That feels very empowering. And also there's a lot of more freedom in there for me or for us to find the way that's right for us. And that feels very fulfilling.
It absolutely is, because you create your quote own Judaism, right? And it's a Judaism that is alive and well and fulfilling. And your Judaism might be different from mine in the details, but the process that what we are going through is exactly the same. We're looking at thousands of years of text, of commentaries, of understandings, and we're adding to this our own understanding. The difference between rabbis 1,000 years ago that were writing commentaries and my reading is that they were much more knowledgeable of the text itself. But that doesn't mean that they could understand what life would be in the 21st century. Right. So there's a reinterpretation. Judaism has always reinterpreted, always. There is no Judaism today that is like a biblical Judaism.
I like the feeling of the giving myself permission to be okay with where I am in relationship to my Judaism, and that it doesn't have to come in and be prescribed. Although I can take the prescription that's been given, but once I swallow that medicine, if you will, how my body uses it and then what comes out of me as a result of it is unique, and it's good and it's fine. And I know a lot of people still struggle to be okay with the liberal, if you will, flexible fluidness that comes from an evolved Judaism. Am I allowed to say that?
I think it's a good way to put it. The only thing that I would add to this is that this is not new. This is not 21st century liberal Judaism. We had a Judaism that said, if you have a rebellious son, you stone their son to death. It's in the Bible. I'm not making this up. It's in the Bible, right? And the rabbis 2,000 years ago read that and said, oh, no, 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 no. This is not okay. We don't do this. Now, maybe it was okay in biblical times to stone people. I don't know. I wasn't living there. But I do know that the rabbis say this is not okay. And so it is the case with many other things that it was okay. And now we look at it and we might say, this is not okay today. But my point is that the evolving Judaism is not new. We have been evolving since the days of the Bible.
I'm nodding my head yes, and of course, based on what you said, and it's all, we want what commitments we're making in our lives and what we're integrating to come to resonate and to be integrated. And I think that that's really important, is to be okay with where I am in relationship to my God, my relationship with Torah, with Judaism, with the people who I connect with. And I think that's what you're really putting forth. When you created for IJKL, the pillars of Judaism, could you tell me a little bit about where does this come from? Where does these ideas and these information, do they sort of trickle down into you? Do you have dreams? I mean, you're creating a lot of curriculum. How does it show up? How do you translate it?
So I think a lot of it is from my personal life story. I grew up with no Judaism whatsoever. I mean, I grew up Jewish, but my grandparents were Holocaust survivors who were very angry at God, and my parents had no Judaism growing up. And so I grew up, I never went to Hebrew school. I never went to a day school. I never learned anything about I never learned anything about anything. I mean, we knew we were Jewish, but.
Where did you grow up?
In Brazil.
Okay.
And that was the extent of it. I knew I was Jewish, but we really had nothing Jewish in our lives. And so I think that, I hate to put it this way, but that might have been a great advantage, because when I came to Judaism, it was not imposed at all. I was, in my old teen years, I started learning when I was 16. So you can imagine that at 16, that is exactly the age where nobody's going to, shove anything down your throat. If anything, you're rebelling against everything. So I had the opportunity to learn as a teenager, as an adult, and try to understand after many years, like, what is it that I wish I had known? What would have made a difference in my life if I knew this? And so when I write curriculum, I have a lot of that in mind. What are the things that I think people would like to know that they don't know? And what I have found is that in general, people that come to learn with IJKL or with other programs, they come from one or two places. Either they grew up with very little, like me, or they grew up in a system where information was imposed. So they did go to a Hebrew school or to a day school, and they learned this is how we do things. So they knew how to do it, but they weren't offered the opportunity to question, why do we do it this way? And what is behind it? And why should I care? And so when I write curriculum, that is very clearly in my mind. What is it that I should let people know about Judaism that will empower them, that will give them the information and the tools that they need to be able to find their place and their connection in Judaism?
Beautiful.
That's basically how I write.
And you write that way, and your inspiration, like I want it to sound like, oh yeah, it floats down from the heavens, and You know, you wake up and you're full of all this information and you just have to write it down. And does that happen sometimes? Why it's important for me?
No, but I'll tell you what happens, and especially now. What happens is sometimes I come across a text or a song or something that I just jump on and I say, oh my gosh, I need to use this. This is so good. So I literally have a list of resources on my computer. And then when I'm going to write something, I go back to that list and I say, is there anything in my list that now I can use? Because there are things that you come across when you're not writing, when you're not searching, and it just is there. And you read that text and you say, wow, this is amazing. So next time I'm going to write something or I'm going to prepare a class, I want to see if I can bring this in. So that does happen, but not the waking up in the morning with inspiration.
No, you reminded me, thank you so much, because that exact same thing happened to me today with two different issues. I was reading an article and it talked about prejudice and privilege. And I stopped, and the two words were in different places in the article, but for me, they like melded. And maybe because we were having this conversation today, we're here, anybody who's on this call has some privilege, whether you want to call it white privilege or privilege that comes from our lineage or privilege from our education. And we also, all of us know to one degree or another that we've been prejudiced against. I just read an article that said, you know, if you're a Jew and you're going to plan to go back to a synagogue, you need to be more aware than you ever have before. So I thought, could I ask you about putting these two words together, privilege and prejudice, and the intersection of them, and how we reconcile or how we sit or work with this? And the second part of this is, I think it's great for us to educate ourselves and have knowledge and information. But the next part is, what do we do with it? Is it incumbent upon us to go take some action? So look what happened. You just catalyzed me to bring everything, you know, that touched me today to the surface and to present it to you. So take it from there, please.
So I'm going to start by saying I have two kids, well, now one, but I had two kids in college. I now have one going into graduate school and one in college and one that has graduated. And every time I hear anything about privilege spoken in a very negative way, because it is used in a very negative way, I cringe. So let me say how I see this. I'm going to start actually from the end. Your second question is, Judaism is a religion of action. Anybody who thinks that learning is enough has not understood Judaism. Judaism is a religion that says over and over and over again, not only in the Bible, but 36 times in the Bible, that you have an obligation to take care of those who are oppressed. And it specifically talks about the widows and the orphans who had nobody to take care of them. We have an obligation to feed the hungry. We have an obligation to dress those who are naked. I mean, this is all coming from Bible. It is really not about theology. It is about being God's partner in creation. When God creates humankind and puts humankind on earth, the message is very clear. I am putting you here so that you're going to be my partner in taking care of this world. So there is no Judaism without action, and I cannot stress that enough. Now, privilege. It really depends what we call privilege, right? So until a very short time ago, we were not allowed to go to country clubs, and we had numbers of how many of us could go to college, and etc. I believe, and this is very sad, that having been oppressed as we have, we very quickly forget. I don't think we are privileged in the sense of, I think we fought a lot to be where we are. wasn't given to us. It never came easy. On the other hand, and again, the Talmud says this, if we only fight for ourselves, what have we become?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I think the most important part. I don't believe that being in the situation we are today is a privilege. I believe this is something we fought for. Where I think we have gone wrong is that I do believe that we have an obligation to fight so that any minority, any group, regardless of skin color, regardless of religion, regardless of sexual preference, regardless of physical abilities or anything else, any human being, we should be making sure that every human being is given the same opportunities that we were given to get where we got. I don't see it as a gift. Nobody gifted this to us. We worked really hard to get where we are. Where I think we are wrong is thinking that once we get here, I can wash my hands and say, why should I worry about anybody else? You should worry about everybody else because that is your mandate. That is the reason God put human beings on earth, to be responsible for one another.
Wow, thank you for that, because it's all too easy to just get cozy in our own comfort of gaining knowledge and gaining information and gaining understanding. And I took the implicit bias test and was shocked. I don't know if you know that Harvard University offers online, it's called implicit bias test. And I did some soul searching and found out, oh my goodness, you know, how can I be the most action-oriented and effective human being if I have implicit biases that are hidden in my shadow and I don't even know that they're there? So I took this, you know, action to expose myself to parts of myself that were hidden so that I can be the best person I can be out in the world. And you're right, clearly, it has to be about all of us and embracing of the commonality of our humanity. And I mean, I still look back at my life and I do feel like I've been privileged, but thank you for that other perspective that my forefathers, parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, and I myself have worked very, very, very hard to get where I am. But now it's a question of where do I take this and how to bring it forward. And it's conversations like this that I believe will be the catalyst to help us to make a better, not only a better person, more meaningful, but a better world that we'll feel more engaged with and more safe. And gosh, that word just popped up, safe. I'm wondering.
So in that safe situation, so there is a meeting of Jewish educators that happens once a year, usually over a week. We end up on some campus and we have a program. And of course, because of COVID, it had to be changed. So it's now happening online over a period of a month. So I've been in touch with many educators, and needless to say, because of everything that is going on, a lot of the workshops were race related and talking about all of the issues with race, etc. And then one educator came and said, you know what we're missing? We're focusing only on race. And as you said, many of us have prejudices that we don't even know we have until you take the test or something happens and you realize, oh my gosh, right? And so this educator reached out to Muslim educators and has had 3 sessions already for Jewish educators on what we need to know about Islam and how, and on a very positive way. And how can we reach out to Muslim educators so that they can be able to learn more about Judaism and we can learn more about Islam, so that we can not only work together, but also teach our people about the other, right? Because one of the beautiful things I think that the Bible says, and the Talmud says on the Bible, is there's a question. If God is God and God can do anything God wants to do, why would God only create one human being? So why did he start with one? Why didn't he just snap his fingers and have 1,000 to begin with, right? And so the answer, it's a great question. The answer that the Talmud gives us is because God wanted us to understand that we all come from exactly the same place. If there were two ancestors, we would start saying, my ancestor came first, or mine was smarter, or mine was white, or mine was whatever. And the Talmud says that's exactly the point. Your ancestor and my ancestor are only one and the same. And therefore, whether you are black or white, Muslim or Jewish, rich or poor, smart or not, it doesn't make a difference. We are all brothers. And this element of humankind that we have is the same in every single one of us.
That's a big, beautiful, it reminds me of one of my rabbi teachers, Rabbi Label Wolf, and he always said to me, Kabbalah, we're cut from the same bolt of cloth, and we're each individual strands in the tapestry of life, and we make up the whole of it. And even though one color is a little different than the other, when you put it all together, it makes the whole picture and the whole image. And when I need to remember, and I leave my egoic individual identity and worries and concerns and fears, I can extrapolate, I could see myself, I am a thread in the tapestry of life and part of the whole. And it just gives me the perspective to make that leap so I can leave the me, I to the side for a moment and make that shift to the we and the us. And I know I'm them too. So thank you for saying that. It was really wonderful. We're coming toward the top of the hour. I'd like to open it up if there are any questions. Marcia, if you want to open it up, if there are any questions, we could invite others in the interim. Sandra, if you would tell us a little bit about the pillars, because I'm innately curious, and I'm like, well, I haven't taken the course. Are you teaching it now?
It's not just me. JKL teaches the course. Sometimes I teach. There are other teachers that teach the course as well. It is a series of 48 lessons, basically 4 modules or 4 pillars of 12 classes each. And we discuss different things. One of the modules is, for example, our ethics, where we really discuss ethics in terms of diverse things. What is the ethics of copyright, right? Which is something that today is fundamentally important because you go online and you get everything that you want, but yet there are still copyright issues.
Oh, for sure.
Or what are the ethics of personal relationships? How should we treat each other? Or the ethics of end of life. What's okay to do and what's not okay at end of life. So we go through several different environmental ethics, ethics of war, several different things that have to do with the Jewish ethics. Or I shouldn't even say Jewish ethics, it's how Judaism sees certain hot topics and what Judaism says is right or is wrong. There is a module, a pillar that is called our beliefs, in which we discuss what do Jews believe about God? What do Jews believe about sin? What do Jews believe about a whole bunch of theological things that we don't typically discuss?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, God is one of the things that is the least discussed, not just in Judaism, but in general. People use the word God a lot, but we rarely talk about what God is for each and every one of us. So that's another pillar. And then we have a pillar that looks into life cycle events and customs, and one that talks about the holidays, right? But again, the whole point of the classes of each lesson is not to teach you what is Pesach, because you don't need me for that. You can go online. It is how can you connect to the messages of Pesach? And that's what the whole curriculum tries to do with each of the lessons that we present.
How important is it for people to feel supported by the people around them? Because as you were speaking, I've had some experiences in my life where it's Pesach and I'm ready to create a Seder, and then my family has said to me, come on, not so much this year, do it quickly, wrap it up fast, let's just, and I've been in so much conflict because my heart wants to share these such important, meaningful symbolism. And then I get the pressure from the kids and they're like, come on, let's get out of here. So what do we do when we don't feel supported in our expression in Judaism of where we are?
So there are a couple of suggestions, and there is no right or wrong here. One of the suggestions is, one of the things that IJKL offers is we always do workshops before holidays. We're doing it again for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We always offer some learning before. And what we do in those workshops is basically give you tools of some things that you can do that are meaningful for the people that usually say, there is nothing in there for me, right? So I usually do offer tools, and certain things are going to work for you, other things are not going to work for you, but everybody finds a couple of things. The other thing that I would say is I am never in favor of watering down or forgetting your Judaism, but I also am in favor of keeping family peace and especially not scaring people away. I would rather people have a shorter Seder than create a situation where there will be no Seder next year. Mm-hmm. What you can do, though, is there are 2 days for a Seder. Right. So one day you do the short version that everybody wants you to do, right? And the other day you look, again, not in COVID times, but you look for friends or other people that think like you, get together, put together your own Seder. It doesn't say anywhere that you have to be exactly with the same people for the 2 Seders. So there are ways to find other people that are going through the same thing, which is, I really want to do something deeper, but my family doesn't. So do one with your family. Still, I would suggest bring in things that are going to be meaningful to them. I mean, I know that some people here know that when my kids were little, I would do a pre-Seder with them. I would sit down on the floor, guitar, puppets. We would do the entire story through puppets, etc. Then they would go to bed, and I would start my Seder at 9 o'clock at night without the kids. And people would say to me, why are you doing this? And I'm like, they're going to hate every second of what I'm doing right now. But I want to do it because I'm entitled to do it my way. They don't have to sit through it. So I'm going to do something for them, and then I'll do mine.
We have one person with their hand up, and boy, Sandra, I wish I had thought of that. Linda has her hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Linda.
Hi, everybody. Changing the subject slightly, Sandra, if you wouldn't mind. How did you come to be in America?
Long story short. So I started getting involved in Judaism at the age of 16. But I only really decided to work with Judaism when I was 27. So I completely switched careers and etc. And then I was working as the education director of a synagogue in Brazil. And their rabbi left, and they started interviewing rabbis. And in a funny twist of things, God sent a single rabbi. And so we ended up getting married. After a few years, after we had our first child, it's interesting how certain things that I grew up with and never bothered me, when I became a mother, started to bother me. So for anybody that knows anything about Brazil, Brazil is a country that is based purely on corruption. It is the most beautiful country in the world. And the way things work is really on corruption, right? You're caught not stopping at a traffic light. You offer a beer to the police officer and you're gone. And so it goes. I mean, that's the, So as a mother, I said, I can't live in a place like this. How am I supposed to teach my kid to follow rules? Because if I teach my child rules are to be followed, my child's going to be the only idiot in this country that follows laws. Nobody follows laws here. And so I decided we need to leave. So with that said, my husband started looking for a position, and we had 3 options. One was in England. There is no way I could live in England, not because of the culture, but because of the weather. I need sunlight. The other was in Aruba, which seemed like a really great vacation, but not a place to raise kids in the long run. And the third one was Texas. And so we moved to Texas. And I have been here ever since.
Beautiful,
You've mentioned
thank you.
a couple of times. Thanks, Linda. You've mentioned a couple of times when you were 16. I guess my curiosity also, did you just wake up one day and say, I have to learn, or were you precipitated by anything?
No, so the big event was when I have twin brothers who are younger than I am. And as they were about to turn 13, my grandfather, who basically was the patriarch in the family, informed my mother that they need a bar mitzvah. Now, there had been absolutely zero any Jewish thing in my life, but my brothers needed a bar mitzvah. Now, why? Because my grandfather wanted to have a big party and be able to invite everybody. For many reasons, when my mother got married and my mother was an only child, they had a very, very small wedding. So my grandfather did not have that opportunity to do a big party. And this was his chance of a big party. So they arranged for my brothers to be tutored. They hated every second of it. Of course, it was totally without context. And my brothers kept saying, why do we have to do this? Why do I have to do this? And the answer was, because you're going to get a big party and you're going to get a lot of gifts. I mean, obviously, nothing that I would recommend today. But this is what happened. So we had a service, a bar mitzvah service for my brothers, which was held in a catering hall, because my grandfather, who wanted the big bar mitzvah, did not want to do it in a synagogue. Wow. So it was held in one of the big catering halls in Sao Paulo. They brought a rabbi, they brought an ark, they brought a Torah, and it was the first time that I had actually attended a service, and I fell in love with it. And that actually made me want to, I said to my mother at the time, this is my heritage. How come that nobody ever gave this to me? And then I started learning by myself. So there was this event. It was the first time I was in a service, not in a synagogue, but in a catering hall.
Well, it's funny. Before I was trying to get from you like that big, this is the way I get information. And now, here it is. It's like, well, what happened when you were 16? I guess I like the drama of the way the world speaks to us, because I know every day that I look outside, open the window, see the cloud formations or see a flower, I feel that God is talking to me, and it's saying, love this world, love your life, look at what's here for you. So I look for the big, and I realize there's big all the time. It's always there to touch us. It's what you said before, remove the coverings from our eyes so that we can see.
Right. It's really, in my Eli talk, I address a lot of this, how we went from the big miracles to the small miracles, but they're not small in importance. They're just what I would call quieter, right? They're not the Hollywood kind. They wouldn't give a movie, but they're miracles surrounding us all the time. It's exactly that. Everything that is around us is an opportunity to engage in the world. And that's what we're here to do. We don't know how long we have. Nobody knows how long they're going to live. Every minute is precious and holy and sacred. And as long as we engage with those moments, we will have lived a meaningful life.
Well, this has been a meaningful conversation. I have been touched by you deeply. I love your energy. I love how you communicate. I see why you are, who you are, what you do, and I'm looking forward to more times to be together. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
On the Innerviews series. I'm so grateful. And Kim, I think Thank you again. And Kim, I'll turn it over to you because I know
Oh.
you always like wrap us up so nicely.
I do.